Good evening, everyone, and all. This is the Screen to Speed Winter Cup, of course, live in Gran Turismo 7. I know that the footage appears that it's the Red Bull Ring, but it's not. It is Spa-Francorchamps. To talk a little bit about it very briefly, it's one of the oldest tracks in the current modern world, built in 1921. Kind of around the location of a lot of the post World War One military bases and headquarters. It, of course, developed into what we know is the legendary track that we all know and love. Of course, footage now showing. Of course, it's played home to the Belgium Grand Prix sporadically between 1925 and 1970, and of course, been a consistent feature of the Formula One grid from 1983 to modern now. Of course, I'm Jamie Jessica Martin, your commentator, your race direction by Sophia Ronwin, and your broadcast director for this one is Mike Yao of AK Esports. So, talking about some of the other incredible things, it's 19 corners, 7 kilometers, one of the longest or longer circuits, purpose-built racetracks in the world. Of course, it is, as we all know, it is a track full of just absolutely high-banked, high-G corners and turns, going from as far as the legendary Radion and Eau Rouge, of course, all the way down to Pouon and through to Campus. Of course, we'll go through a lap a little bit later of the track, but this is, of course, a massive thing to get used to, and really has been home to absolutely legendary moments. Of course, talk about some other things. Endurance racing is a pretty popular section of racing that occurs here at the track. Of course, the Spa 24, of course, has been run almost plenty of times. Of course, was one of the few races that kind of ran interspersed with a lot of the wars. And we'll go from there. We'll go through all the results and we'll go through the championships. Okay, so to start off with, it's TBSS Girl at the moment, who is currently leading the way, only by about 8 points after a relatively positive result. Of course, 1 win and a podium last week out. Gears Grona, after a win, has managed to close that gap up in P2, and Sean Mickelson, of course, girl Sean, currently in P3. Not a great week last week, but still enough to make an impact. Sarah Hawkey, Mariah Light, Tulipix, who is another person to keep an eye on, Sharon Fly, Asher Silva, Purple Labris, and Annalise Riot finished the top 10. Kay Oliveira, Tanakitas, Ellie Lamas, and Just Hun, as well as Girl Cold, make up the top 15, though those gaps are pretty small. Shara PT Sandrita, Kristen Back, Yukino Suzuka, and Zoe make up the top 20. We'll move on to qualifying now, of course, and right now we're just seeing some of the outlaps as it stands. If you don't know anything about these races, of course, it is a singular 50-minute race around the circuit. And of course, we're going to see some of the differences here if you've watched any of the iRacing events that have occurred, and not necessarily Gran Turismo 7. There are differences between the two sims, whereas of course iRacing is about as real to life as possible as in terms of the simulation respect. Of course, Gran Turismo 7 uses specific features, like for example arcade-like features, like the forced slowdowns, which you have to take, or there's a forced slowdown point you must take it at. So that is, of course, something to bear in mind and will have impacts on this race as it goes along. Talking about some of the things to watch so far, we've had 3 races of this series: Watkins Glen, Monza, and the Nürburgring so far. Watkins Glen at the moment is, of course, was one which was 2 splits, but split 1 was led by TBSS Girl, who won, of course, that race in pretty confident fashion in their Aston Martin. Of course, we'll wait to see what TBSS Girl can do here. Of course, Monza was a completely different story. Tulipix coming into the fray and ultimately showing an absolutely dominant level of performance at Monza. Of course, benefiting from dealing with some of the chaos earlier on. The Nürburgring, it was all Gears of Grona, of course, a Twitch streamer. That's, of course, absolutely, once again, a complete switch over Tulipix, and really a strong performance from them. Just watching Gears of Verona at the moment, currently sitting on the back straight through just as you go through Blanchemont. Starting up now, possibly trying to sort some stuff out. But going to go slow, heading into the chicane, of course, at this track. Now, as I mentioned, this track in terms of Spa-Francorchamps has changed quite a bit over the years, from completely different segments from the pre-World War II. Of course, it's became a lot more aggressive and a lot more formed as it was quite a round circuit, as was kind of the theme of most purpose-built racing autodromes at the time. But of course, it has developed with consistent updates, especially to the gravel trap, or what was a gravel trap, this corner right here. Of course, going up through Rouge into Radion here. And we're all going to stay on board, and we're just going to show a lap from Gears of Verona, of course, last week's race winner. And we've got the Kennel Straight, one of the fastest straights on the motorsports calendar. You suddenly have to go through these two left and right corners at Les Combes, trying to keep the car together while also putting enough as possible. So it was a right, left, and right to go through there as they head down this small straight here into Bruxelles. Bruxelles here, you have to be really favoring the accelerator, but not trying to apply the brake too much, otherwise you'll lose a ton of time. So now we're heading to turn 12. Pouin was formerly known as No Name, for the irony of whatever that one was. And as we head through, this of course is one of the fastest segments of the track in this downhill section, heading down towards turn 13. And as you can see right now, we're heading into the campus section. So this is going to be a sudden right, heading into a left right here, another cutback. And as we continue going, we're going to head over towards Stavelot. Of course, heading into another right-hander here through into turn 16 and Poulfriere. And here is one of the more legendary sections. That's where, of course, your penalty zone is going to be as you head now through Blanchemont. So here might be a constantly curving corner, but this is one where you can definitely take a lot more speed and pace through it, as it's a very fast, slightly curved corner. And you head into the chicane, turns 19 and 20 to finish off the lap. The pit straight on the right, the pit entrance on the right. Of course, right now it's Tulipix leading the way in terms of the fastest lap. But Gears of Verona, while on board, has set the new fastest lap of 2:27.537. So I think for me, if I'm looking at things to watch out for this race, I'm going to have about 11 drivers. Things to look out for. TBS S-Girl is currently leading the championship. Now, that's come through consistency, and that's come through pretty strong success. But here is where we're going to see a little bit of intrigue here. So one factor that exists here is that we possibly are going to see some wet weather, and as you can see, it's really impacting Sarah Hawkey there. It was Liberal Chaos, the only driver out on track right now on non-wet tyres, or would have been non-wet tyres, I was about to say, was light speed, but looks like currently in the pit lane. So the question is, how much is this going to impact the other drivers? To me, I think everyone else is pretty much out. It looks like Sarah Hawkey's come in to get some wet tyres, but Sharon Fly is already 4 tenths off, so I think right now, I think this is just really poor timing for a lot of the drivers. With Tulipix, Gears of Verona, and TBS S-Girl currently setting their fastest laps, locking up the top 3. I don't think we're going to see any faster laps, as you can see one of the cars in the gravel trap. Talking about some of the intrigue around this race as well, not including the fact that Spa, for many things, is often affected by rain, but not necessarily as much as people say. Of course, one thing that's always said is, well, Spa always rains if you're a fan of Formula 1, for example, but as many people in the know actually know, is that actually most of the time Spa usually has pretty dry races. It just, in fairness, has been pretty recently. Wet weather has always been something that's come up in the last couple of years. Not always wet, but in terms of Belgium, of course, being a European country, you're going to obviously get some rain here and there. So we're just waiting to see what can be done. But yeah, qualifying is pretty much over. But to be honest with you, there's no lost value here in going out of your way and getting in the laps here, because there is the chance that you're going to get rain in the race. And I think, to be honest with you, getting adjusted to that environment, adjusted to that kind of what to expect, will be very helpful for a lot of these drivers. So we're on board at the moment with Yukino Suzuka. Of course, that is Michael Plug, one of the United Sim Team drivers, and ultimately a driver that's raced in both the iRacing and now the GT7 series, so a couple of drivers that have made their way over to both. But Gears of Corona at the moment is pretty much leading quite fairly and leading the way, and I think this is mostly just trying to see what Gears can do in terms of the wet weather, adjusting, making sure they're ready. Now, talking around the grid so far, we're going to see, from what other drivers have said to me or mentioned, this might be one of the tracks where Tulipix could potentially struggle here. Ultimately, not necessarily because of the skill level of Tulipix, but more specifically the car. From what has been explained, the McLaren is a pretty fast car here, and the Mazdas plow through the corners, and ultimately it does slow up. The car is tangibly slower in comparison to the McLaren. So that's the information I've been given so far along those lines. It's hard to say what some of the other cars, for example, like the Aston Martin will do in the case of TPSS Girl 21, but we'll see exactly how this all lays out and really how much this impacts the race going forward. Now, of course, if you want to share in the chat who you're supporting, make sure that you post who you're supporting. I'm keeping an eye on both the YouTube and the Twitch chats. I'll be happy to, of course, mention you and show exactly or see exactly who you're looking to support. So on board with Sarah Hawkey right now in that Ferrari, and the McLaren of K-Back at the moment. A 2-second penalty there. To be honest with you, with the weather being as hectic as it is, it's not entirely surprising that some of the drivers are starting to struggle. They're likely going off of track, and because of that, they're just slowly gaining these penalties. Now, I guess we get to see some of the differences between the race between, of course, iRacing and GT7 right here. With K-Back at the moment just about to hit the forced deceleration zone at the penalty line, which will be just here. So the car slows down, it's forced to slow down, and you lose time as, of course, the car decelerates. Having a look. About 20 seconds left of the 20 seconds left of qualifying, but it looks pretty much set in stone with these, of course, with these performances and these laps. Of course, we'll review through the full grid for this race, but it does, of course, look like, very doubtfully, it's going to change. Now we're just waiting at the moment for the results. And of course, you're qualifying the fastest lap of the race, of the qualifying session, sorry. A pole time of 2:27.537, going the way of Gears of Corona. Starting on the front row is Tulipix with a pretty solid lap there, only 3 tenths off. TBSS Girl and Girl Sean, the two of the top 4 in the championship, currently on row 2. Sarah Hawkey and Lightspeed currently on row 3, with Sharon Fly and K-Back on row 4. And to finish up on row 5, Liberal Chaos and Yukino Suzuka round up the grid. So we're just cutting here to a much sunnier looking Spa-Francorchamps, but ultimately, in comparison at least to the one we just saw, but ultimately it really is something to behold. And I mean, it has been, in terms of a track, it is absolutely legendary. It's one of the most well-known tracks of all time. When you talk about motorsports, there are very few tracks that really bring out the positivity, or specifically everyone, including non-motorsport fans, know, but Spa is one of them. The Belgian circuit really is a sign of what can happen or what can be developed with so much history when you've built an absolutely incredible circuit. It's had its issues, it's had its problems, it's had its ups and its downs, but Spa really is one for the ages, and like I said, it has played host to so much. And we'll move over to the grid very shortly. But talking about this, of course, it plays host currently, like I said, to Formula 1, the Spa 24 and the World Endurance Championship 6 hours. But as we go here, we're watching from the perspective of Gran Turismo 7 this time, a digital version of Spa-Francorchamps, as all the lights go out, and it is going. Oh, looks like an incident there, looks like a mistake there from Lightspeed, possibly just a late there, but Gears Grona leading the way at the moment in that McLaren. TBS S-Girl at the moment getting the advantage. The Aston looking very strong so far, so that is potentially important, because in this situation, TBS S-Girl, for the championship reasons, really either needs to keep it close or ideally needs to beat Gears Grona out here. Otherwise, it could potentially be very difficult in terms of championship. We could see championship change almost start at the end of this race, depending on the results. Of course, under pressure now, you can see Tulipix getting an incredible run coming out of Radion as they head through the Kemmel Straight. And it looks like TBS S-Girl has suddenly started to struggle. It's a massive gaggle of cars here. TBS S-Girl really getting caught up here through a lot of the action and a lot of the chaos through Les Combes. And really, TBS S-Girl has gone from 2nd to 4th in the space of a couple of corners. Tulipix now really needs to get the hammer down, because all of this is helping Gears Grona start to stretch her legs. But it looks like Sarah Hawkey might try and make a move here in the Ferrari, as they head, of course, through Bruxelles, as they've gone through Bruxelles through turn 11, heading down towards Pouan, turn 12. It is side by side, Tulipix at the moment, Sarah Hawkey currently battling for that other position. Girlshawn has had a really good run here, of course, not had a great race, but we're having a look at the moment. But we're looking at this moment, we're looking, of course, a different set of tyre choices from what I'm hearing, but of course, we'll go through them as the early segment of the race goes on. A mixture of softs and intermediates from what I hear, but you can see right now it has been a massive struggle here for others, but looks like Sarah Hawkey's having a really good run in that Ferrari, so potentially a surprising thing that I was mentioning earlier. It could be a problem for TBS S-Girl if they didn't keep up or didn't push towards Gears Grona. It looks like Sarah Hawkey is absolutely rapid here. This is an interesting thing that I didn't expect. Sarah Hawkey had a fantastic race at Monza. They had an okay race last time out at the Nürburgring, but it looks like, I think possibly the tyre differences or the tyre changes have been a bit of a positive thing here for the Ferrari, and I think the Ferrari is already starting to stretch its legs a bit here. Gears Grona right now is just trying to make up the gap as they head down the first start-finish straight into La Source. But it looks like Sarah Hawkey is just leading the way, and there's not really much that Gears Grona can do. Tulipix right now and Girlshawn, once again those two Ferraris, pretty well at the moment, that UST Ferrari in this case, trying to push forward. TBS S-Girl, though, is still struggling a bit behind in the Aston, which is a potential problem. As you can see, that Ferrari straight line speed, I mean, what else can you say? Heading up through the Kemmel Straight, the Mazda just doesn't even stand a chance by the looks of it. really, really, really struggling here for Tulipix. And as they head through Lake Com, it is Francorchamps taking the third place position on the final step of the podium. Of course, we've still got a long way to go, a lot to happen, potentially weather implications as well. But it could be, and will continue to be, an interesting race to watch. See Lightspeed in the background there in P6, the Alpha really doing as well here, and I think from some of the information I've been given from drivers like Mariah, I think there was some concerns around the performance of this track, not only because it's not a strong point for Mariah, but also the Alpha definitely does seem to struggle a little bit more here, so it just doesn't quite work out as well. But as I'm talking, Gizzagrona has fallen down to P3. Those two Ferraris really are right now stretching their legs. Is this the long game here is the big question. This could be a potentially interesting long game here. You know, short-term gain, long-term loss. But we'll wait to see what happens. I'm keeping an eye to see if I can try and figure out some of the tyres here, because I think tyres might be a factor. I'm not 100% sure. But it is the two Ferrari leading the way. Right, so because of this, I've just been had someone mention to my ear that the front two are both on dry tyres, so they're going for the short term here, and as you can see, they're both already coming into the pits. I think the weather's starting to get to them. I think they wanted to see how long they could get out and see what they could do, but obviously that's come at quite an inopportune time for them. 3 laps in, and it is Gizzagrona now leading the way. The rest of the field were on intermediates, meaning that they were just holding on to see what was the best strategy. They essentially were saying, I'm going to stick to a strategy of putting the intermediates on and just doing a stop here and seeing what would happen. The two Ferraris, though, went on soft, so because of that, they then became essentially victim to the wet weather as the race went on. And as you can see, Tulipix has now started to push forward, and that's where, as the rain starts to come down, you can start to see it. Sarah Hawkey's out on the wets. That's an interesting choice there for the Ferrari that was leading the race a moment ago. And I think, to be honest with you, it is interesting to see how this all lies out. Well, in fairness, those two, I would be very surprised if they can go to the end of the race so early on. But it does ultimately pan out. At least they've done their mandatory stop. So now it's the question mark is what impact this will have on the other drivers. Yukino Suzuka at the moment, currently chasing down Sarah Hawkey. So not a great situation to be in. I think Sarah's gone with the expectation that the track is going to get wetter and wetter and wetter. Meaning that... And ultimately we're just waiting to see how this all pans out. But Gizzagrona, Tulipix, TBSS Girl, currently your top 3, unchanged from how they lined up on the grid. But I think there's not really much else you can say on that front. Those 3, of course, are your race winners over the last 3 rounds. So the fact that they're all competing against each other once again really kind of just tells you who the favourites are in this championship battle. Of course, Tulipix is behind. We know that because of the championship. There's a yellow flag here, overtaking prohibited. Not sure what's caused the yellow flag, but the green flags have now come out. I think it was Sharon Fly having a problem. Yeah, looks like Sharon is also on dries. Maybe taking too much of a risk there, coming in a little bit too late in comparison to the other dry runners. So because of that, it just has caught out the McLaren driver right there. Apologies, she is on wet, she is just struggling. So Gizzagrona at the moment, of course, I mentioned it earlier, I was mentioning the championship factors here. Tulipix is ultimately behind. That's just because Tulipix was not able to enter the round 1 at the Glen in comparison to Gizzagrona and TBSS Girl. And because of that, we potentially probably I mean, Tulipix is fast enough to be in a championship fight. It's just the fact that Gears of Corona and TBSS Girl have been just so consistent in all 3 races that, well, to be quite blunt with you, it's just been a strong performance from those two, and I think that Tulipix is really not in a position to be able to catch up. But so far, these are the names that that ultimately are contributing to the success, or at least to the win columns of the rate of this season so far. Oh, a bit of a slide there coming out of the source there for the for K-Pack at the moment, and of course Sarah Hawkey was leading the race a bit earlier, but trying to see what she can do. Sharon Fly at the moment has fallen all the way back to P9, not completely last in the chain, but it looks like Sharon Fly might have thought of a move going through, of course, Eau Rouge, heading into Radion at the top of the hill. Of course, as we know, it's this segment here that's Radion. As the track starts to level out into the Kemmel Straight, at the top of Eau Rouge, at the top of the hill, that is Radion. So it's a 2-corner segment rather than one being one massive corner. But mentioning some of the others, of course, the only driver so far, I think, to be honest with you, looking at the stats at the moment, none of the top 3 drivers, so none of the drivers have finished on the podium at each race. Now, of course, there is a bit of a but and to this. Race 1 was split into 2 splits, and Gears of Corona did ultimately win split 2 and gain points from it. So that is something to bear in mind. But of course, there was obviously a split 2 points there for that, so that did ultimately change the amount that Gears of Corona had. But since of course there, in terms of first split, in terms of all top split races here in the Gran Turismo 7 run, all of these drivers at least have either won a race and then at least been on the podium in some way, shape or form. Of course, TBSS Girl winning the race in Watkins Glen, the round 1, of course. Going into round 2, it was Tulipix who won the race, with Gears of Corona finishing in P3, TBSS Girl finishing P4 in that one. And of course, the Nürburgring, it was all 3 drivers, the current order that you're watching right now, in the exact order that, of course, finished over the line at the GP circuit there. Yep, so it looks like Gears of Corona is currently under pressure now, with Tulipix making their way there. So I'm just looking at the chat. Yes, Isaac, I'm doing absolutely fine, thank you. Thank you very much for asking me that question. If you want to show who you're supporting, though, everyone, make sure you put it in the chat at the moment. I'm obviously watching both chats, so it's fantastic to see how things are going. Gears of Corona, Tulipix. Tulipix is starting to be bringing that gap ever so slightly, which might be a bit of a solid scenario here for TBSS Girl, because ultimately bringing Gears of Corona back in is helpful for the championship results here, and ultimately trying to keep close, or trying to keep the lead at the moment. Gears of Corona at the moment is currently leading the way, but question will be exactly how will this pan out. Looking at the moment, and an issue there for Yukino Suzuka, and I think just sliding into the pit wall there, coming out of La Source. Can't see him manage to save it, but struggling. Right, I'm just having a look at the moment, keeping an eye on this moment, and it's a 5/10 penalty there for Yukino Suzuka. He's going to have to serve that a bit later on in that Mitsubishi, but it's going to be a little bit of a gap here. So it's getting closer and closer and closer at the front. I think the wet weather has managed to ultimately positively impact that Mazda, and I think in comparison to the McLaren, which ultimately would have, from what I understand, would have stretched its legs in the dry, it has brought these two drivers who are incredibly pacey together. Now, of course, TBSS Girl is currently falling away from these two in P3, so not ideal in terms of the championship leader, but still not an entire world away. And I think, to be honest with you, if these two start fighting, I can imagine that gap will start to come down as well. You see Tulipix is getting closer and closer and closer, nearly down to a second, as they head through the final chicane very shortly for the 6th lap of this race. It is Gears of Corona and Tulipix. Gears of Corona P1, Tulipix P2. Gap still around 1.2 seconds as they head through La Source. It is the McLaren ahead of the Mazda, but that Mazda looks like it's in a position that it could, and it definitely has a chance to really make a difference here. That time is fluctuating, especially through some of the faster sections. You can see that McLaren getting a little bit away there, but I think this is ultimately the one thing that's meant that Tulipix has not really managed to make the inroads that she would have been hoping to do. Gears are currently in P1, but to be quite honest with you, it is just getting dicey, and I think this is it. Tulipix is getting the time back in these corners, but down the straights like Kennel, Gearza is doing just enough to make up some gap. So now the question is who's going to blink first here? Because I think that this is going to be a question of who starts to struggle. Can Gearza do enough and just keep it glued to the circuit as best as possible? Or can Tulipix just absolutely walk away, especially with the corners? It's who really kind of takes that first step here. And of course, that gap's up to 1.5. Question will be, what is that McLaren going to do? Is it going to start having a very rare loose end, especially in the wet, and Gearza is having to overcorrect? Or will Tulipix have the benefit here? And it looks like Gearza has managed to find another bit of pace here. Of course, Tulipix is leading the way at the moment. Of course, had the fastest lap of the race in terms of on-track pace, but of course that was when the track was slightly drier, very early on lap 2. Of course, the pace has dropped down. It's nearly a 3-minute lap so far over the last couple of laps as it gets wetter and wetter and wetter. Gears of Corona, though, leading the way. That gap now up to 2 seconds. I think that there's some comfort there. I think possibly a few of those issues there was just getting comfortable and getting adjusted to the environment. So they're on board at the moment with the Alfa Romeo of Lightspeed at the moment. Only 3.8 seconds behind TBSS Girl. Could be a possibility to grab another podium. Did grab a podium, of course, at the opening race at Watkins Glen. So could potentially be a factor here. And it looks like Tulipix is getting, especially in these very slow corners, was getting some additional pace. But in that case, that seemed a lot slower for the Mazda. Yes, I think, to be honest with you, Gears of Corona at the moment, it's depending on looking there, starting to see the slide, that rear end of that Mazda really struggling to hold on at the moment. I think the McLaren is starting to find its groove here. And if this starts to dry up as the race goes on, I think I can see Gears are starting to really run away with it. I just wonder how much of that was because of the comfort of the car and how much of it was just the fact that Gears wasn't quite being able to go as fast as possible, and now she's found our comfort zone. Lightspeed at the moment in P4 at the moment, still about 3.8 seconds behind TBSS Girl for the top final step on the podium. Sarah Hawkey in P6, a little bit of a battle here for Sarah Hawkey, Kate back at the moment, and Sharon Fly. You see Yukino Suzuka coming into the pits a little bit earlier, so possibly a change of strategy there for the Dutch driver. there is, as you can see, there is a slight dry line that is forming. So that could be a potentially interesting reflection of what this, what's going to happen in terms of the weather here. Keep it close. Ooh, riding the curve, heading into and hitting the grass there, heading up through Eau Rouge. But it is Sarah Hawkey currently still leading this group, but K-Back at the moment is currently under pressure from Sharon Fly. The two McLarens currently battling away. We're about 18 minutes in, nearly 20 minutes. And so far, while it's been very simple at the front, wet weather definitely has had an impact on how this race could ultimately open up. And at least in the further down the field, there is some battling going on, especially between these two. The battling has allowed Sarah Hawkey to pull away ever so slightly. So with that, of course, it's now a two-way battle in this group right here. Just waiting to see what we can get in terms of performance. That McLaren, those McLarens definitely are just pushing and pushing and pushing. Just you can see how that fine line between overdoing it, undercooking it and overcooking it really, especially in these conditions. But with the dry line forming, I can imagine we're going to start seeing these cars really start to grip up a little bit here, which possibly explains why the McLaren of Gears of Grona has managed to really start pulling away. Not only for tyre wear reasons, but also just looks like hit the marbles there, went wide and hit the marbles. That was a problem, of course, for K-Back right there, and ultimately that allowed Sharon Fly through. That gap between Tulipix and Gears of Grona, though, is kind of hovering around the same point. No inroads really being made here from the Mazda, but, of course, anything can happen. All it takes is one mistake. All it takes is losing the car, making a mistake, cashing a wall, and the race completely is thrown on its head. I mean, fastest lap of the race is still in the hands of Tulipix, so the bonus point there going Tulipix's way. Gears of Grona, of course, did get the bonus point for the pole lap. So we're waiting to see what's happened. It's like Sharon heading into the pits now on half a tank of fuel. So we're going to wait and see if Sharon is just going to do a one-stop and is going to try and see if they can try and take this until the final lap of the race. Yet to pit though, Gears of Grona, Tulipix, TBSS Girl, Lightspeed, currently the cars that have yet to pit. We know that FR Girl, Sean and Sarah Hawkey have pitted, and Sharon of course has pitted also. So far, you know, these two are the closest at the moment. But that kind of a gap is starting to reel in a little bit again. Interesting here. I'm curious to see whether this is stuff, for example, like tires and grip, or whether this is just Gears of Grona starting to struggle a little bit. I'm wondering if this is a factor, because that gap is now starting to come down, and I'm not sure why. I think right now this is already down to 1.3 seconds. This here is interesting. This here could be a massively interesting thing for this race. Because at one point it looked like Gears of Grona really was kind of in pole position here. And for whatever reason, it just seems that McLaren is starting to really struggle. And the Mazda is just being pushed to its absolute limit. Late braking, and Tulipix holds on, but that's incredibly wide and almost drifts around the corner. That wet weather there costing a massive amount of time. So all of that gap, I think, a bit too late on the brakes there, and I think the car, of course, washed out wide onto the wet line, and it just meant that Mazda just completely had the rear end fish hook out, just kind of pull itself away, and there was nothing else that could be done. TBSS Girl having a bit of a quiet race now in P3 is now 5 seconds ahead, 5.5 seconds ahead of Lightspeed, who has a penalty, a 5/10 penalty that's going to have to be served at the beginning pull free air. So we'll have to wait to see what happens here. Of course, FR Girl Sean at the moment had a really good run in the dry early on, but of course, as we know, the rain came very quickly, and because of that, and like Sarah Hawkey, who was leading the race earlier, it just meant that they had to take the early pit stop as soon as it became too heavy to use dry tyres. A best there though for Sarah Hawkey, so that you can see that the weather is starting to improve ever so slightly. K back at the moment, currently in P7. Relatively well considering, but has been a bit of an eventful time for the American driver. Gap's now down to just less than a tenth of a second. Sorry, it's down to about 1 second. I'm just wondering where a lot of this time loss is coming from here. TBSS Girl is definitely making some slight inroads here as well. So that Aston's starting to open up. Lightspeed at the moment, of course, still has that penalty and all going very wide through Puan. Oof. Not great there for Lightspeed, that eats more into that gap. The Aston is starting to make ground though, so it's not as if this podium is in this exact order, not alone through Gears of Grona and Chulapix's own efforts, but it's possible that TBS Girl is starting to really come into a positive stretch of weather here with the weather, so it looks like there's a lot of question marks around how the final order will finish up. As they head through the chicane, heading into the start-finish straight, it is Gears of Grona leading the way, but it looks like Chulapix is heading into the pits now, so taking the early stop here in comparison to the driver that she's competing with, Gears of Grona. Gearza will take another lap or two, I believe, for this one, but Chulapix now being in the pits. TBSS Girl is now through up to P2. Of course, not necessarily net P2, because we have to wait and see what the tyre strategy, what the fuel strategy, what the overall strategy is going to be. And this is a very long pit lane as well. As you can see, now coming into the pits here, and the Mazda is going to, of course, get its tyres changed. And we're waiting to see the fuel be put into the car. It's going to want to try and hopefully see out halfway through this race, considering we're about halfway through. Just over halfway through here. She's on dries. Interesting. Interesting. Chulapix has taken the decision here to go onto the softs, thinking that the dry line is dry enough that this could be positive here. Sarah Hawkey's come in, I think decided that wets probably aren't the way to go. But this is the gamble here. This is a massive gamble. If Chulapix is right about this, there is a possibility that is the case. If Chulapix is right about this, this could be a massive, massive, massive thing here. And oh, looks like Gears of Grona really struggling. Keep it together. Yeah, it looks like TBSS Girl at the moment currently pulling in that gap of us slightly. That's kind of fluctuating as well. I wonder if that McLaren is really starting to struggle with its tyres. And I wonder if the Aston is just taking care of it a lot better. But it just seems like TBSS Girl is reeling in Gears of Grona at the moment. Lightspeed at the moment is still a way back in the Alpha. I'm just waiting to see what the pace is like on those dry tyres. That is going to be my big question. Because that is going to be 101. If Chulapix is incredibly fast here on the dry tyres, then this could be the sign that other drivers need to make the move to switch over. Yeah, looks like Gizzo's now in the pits now. Currently going to cover off Chulapix. Question will be, what can happen? There's a yellow flag out there at the moment.
Oh, that's Girl Sean at the moment there. That's of course had that issue heading through into Blanchimont. Not ideal there for the Ferrari driver. TBSS Girl, Gears of Corona, all in the pits. Lightspeed, all in the pits, switching to the dry tires. Question will be, where do they come out? When do they come out? It looks like Gearza might be in trouble here. Tulipix is ahead. Tulipix is ahead on net strategy here. It's possible that during that lap, Tulipix did enough to manage to pull in enough of a gap to end up taking the net lead of this race. Now this is interesting. Question will be, what can Tulipix do to hold on? Yeah, it's going to be down to how will the tires do? How will that Mazda look after the tires? But the dry line definitely has worked here, but already starting to really pull out a massive lead as the tires here, are a one lap warmer for Tulipix. And I think this is ultimately the way you need to look at it. You have to pull as much of a gap as physically possible here before Gears of Corona manages to get those tires into temperature and starts to eat back into that gap. Because I think you need to just give yourself as much time and as much space as possible. TBSS Girl now is starting to fall away a little bit now that, of course, the cars seem to be on fresh rubber. So I think Gaston possibly doesn't have the same level of pace here in comparison to the McLaren, but anything can happen. And we did see later on in that stint, we did see, of course, TBSS Girl start to pull in that gap. Gearza, though, is still not able to eat into that gap for Tulipix. This is potentially interesting. And it is fantastic to watch so far, just seeing how the strategy, how the tire strategy, how the calls and your timings really have an impact on how your race will go. And so far, I think Tulipix has made an absolute blinder of a decision. I thought that this would be the kind of thing that would have happened last race at the Nürburgring. Tulipix made the early decision to come in and I think got the tires wrong, got the timing wrong. This time around, though, it has seemed to, at least for the moment, it seems to have panned out. That gap up to six seconds now, last lap. That is incredible. The dry tires down. Oh, Gears of Corona has had a problem. It's had a problem, had a major problem. And this is significant. This is not only significant for the race, but it's also significant for the championship here. Because TBSS Girl is going to go past. Your championship leader is going to go past here and is now going to be ahead of the main competitor. If this stays the same here, then Gears of Corona could lose significantly on the championship. Really, really, really sudden moment here. It looks like Lightspeed is going to have to try and get round. Looks like a yellow flag here. A bit further down, but Tulipix is now leading the way. And Gears of Corona doesn't look to be the one, doesn't look to be in a good position here. Oh, looks like TBSS Girl's had a problem. I think the weather's just gone. I think the weather's just switched back again. I don't think that dry line is as dry anymore. And oh boy, this really, 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 I was talking for a moment that strategy, that ultimately that was terrible for the championship. But oh gosh, 3 seconds penalty here. The dry tires, this is all kicked back into the complete opposite direction. The weather has completely changed this one around all over the place. The tried runners just have absolutely nothing. They have absolutely nothing. And it just seems like an unbelievable set of circumstances. The question is that Tulipix now needs to get into the pit lane. Needs to get into the pit lane. It's obvious that the tyres are not right. But it just seems this isn't working out. The penalty being served here. I think Giza is going to eat massively into that gap. Unbelievable. Of course, Tulipic's going to have to serve the penalty here. Serves the penalty. Giza has a penalty also. Giza has got a penalty also. So we do have that, so that will probably add maybe about 1.5 seconds onto Gears of bonus time. But this right here could have just brought this race back in. If you're talking about pure sheer luck, Gears seems to have had it all in spades right now. Tulipix has stayed out well. Is Tulipix expecting the weather to suddenly, the track to dry up again and Gears to have made the mistake? I'm not sure about this decision. I'm really not sure. I say that, but Gears has gone incredibly wide through the chicane heading into the last corner. This is so hard to call. The strategy, the weather has really completely thrown this race on its head. Tulipix does not have the pace on the dry tyres right now. And you can see that by the significant gap that's been eaten into by Giza. But Giza has made the decision to go onto wetter tyres. So because of this, now the question is, how quickly does the track dry up? Because if the track dries up too fast here for Giza, this could be a massive issue. And oh, TBSS girl is now gone. Oh, and reversing into the line there. But that has dropped the championship leader down. Seems to be a massive problem for that Aston. Heading out the source. That's 2 times that spin has happened. It's allowed light speed through. That gap is still coming down. I'm not sure about the decision here. I'm not sure about the decision. Mind you, it stopped raining and it's evened out. Now, if the track continues to dry up, this might have been a smart decision here. This could have been a massively smart decision. Just waiting to see what happens here. It just looks like this could be massively interesting because Gears has, of course, made that move onto the old other compound of tyres, expecting it to remain wet. But I think the window that Gears would have had has gone, and even then I think that Gears probably would have had to have come out if it dried up, would have had to have come in for another set of tyres. I think Gears has just been caught out here. It went away from her, back into her grasp, and back away from her again in the space of about 4 laps. This is pretty mad at the moment. And I think we're now starting to see the repercussions of that tyre change. I don't think Gears is able to make the inroads compared to the dry tyres. The gap's starting to extend. I think that Tulipix has decided to make the right decision here, thinking that the track is going to dry off, and has held on. Which is ultimately an absolutely fantastic strategy call. In terms of overall strategy, that's absolutely fantastic from the Mazda driver. TBSS girl, though, is struggling. This has not been great here for the Aston. I'm wondering if as the weather starts to get as the track starts to get drier. It looks like already starting to make in some of that gap. It does seem that TBSS Girl is starting to find a bit of a groove and a bit of rhythm here as the circuit dries out, as you get that dry line. So it is starting to kind of drive or get into Lightspeed's groove there, but so much going on. Apparently TBSS Girl 21 has damage on the front of the car, meaning that I think that this could make things a lot more difficult for that Aston Martin. I mean, what else can you say right now? We're heading into the last 10 minutes. Not long away from that final 10 minutes. And it just seems as if this race has completely turned on its head. Earlier in this race, I said it looked almost regimented at the front. Gears of Corona, Tulipix, TBSS Girl. They started on the front in the front three positions, and they were still in the front three positions in the exact same order for much of it. But as the race has started to change, as the weather has started to change, strategy has made an effect. So at this moment, looking at this moment, Gearza is starting to, just having a look at the moment. 234 there from Tulipix. Now the question is can the Mazda hold on and hold its tyres here? Yeah, there we go. I think the McLaren is in trouble here. That was a 238 there, 4 seconds. I think the call to come in was an incredibly short-term gain scenario. Should the McLaren have stayed out and held off on those tyres? It seems like it should have. TBSS Girl right now is pretty well behind. Gearza, I would be very surprised if Gearza doesn't have to come into the pits again. I would be very surprised. Because she's now starting to lose significant time on Tulipix in front. Luckily, I think Lightspeed does currently, there's enough of a gap by the looks of it to ultimately make it, to make a pit stop possible. But I would say if I'm Gearza right now, I would make that move. TBS Girl is coming into the pits now. Watching at the moment, TBSS Girl currently coming into the pit lane. Want to see what happens there. Sharon flying now up to P4. Said less than 10 minutes to go. And it is so far looking like Tulipix's race here. Does look like Tulipix has got this one sorted, but we shall see. TBSS Girl has gone onto intermediates. Possibly the decision here is, you know what, penalty there already coming out the pit lane, so not ideal there, but I imagine that the decision here is, well, I've got nothing else to lose. If something happens here, I could be in a perfect position to make up spots. But that time penalty certainly isn't going to help. I think if your gears are here, you probably have to make the decision of heading on dries. Or do you hold out for the last 8 minutes, accept that you're not going to win this race, but you have enough of a gap to potentially, and you're not losing enough to really warrant you coming into the pits once again. I think, yeah, 5 seconds slower than Tulipix, but right now is maintaining enough of a gap, or in fact it's growing the gap slightly over Lightspeed, so it's not, I think at this point, Gearza, I think, probably has to accept that P2 is what's going to happen, unless Tulipix has a massive problem. I think that this race is kind of settling into the position where we're going to see Tulipix Gearza and Lightspeed heading into the last couple of minutes. It has made things very interesting. The traffic, just seeing the weather and how it's impacted this race, how it's impacted the strategy, how it's changed how these cars are running. It's just fantastic to watch. Sharon and Fly at the moment, currently in P4. A really good run considering some of the issues she had earlier on in the race. This is a pretty good run here for Sharon, and will ultimately help with keeping in really good touching distance of some of the drivers ahead in the championship. He's going to make points up, not that many, but he's going to make some points up on Girl Sean in this one. Others, though, ahead are still ahead. I say that's incorrect. TBSS Girl currently is ahead, of course, as your championship leader, but this result definitely changes that one. The end of this round, should it stay the same, TBSS Girl is going to be second place in the championship, and it will be Gearza Grona leading the way in the championship. Not a race win, but the benefit here is of all the people that needed that one, Chulapix is probably the one you could get away with. Heading into the last 5 minutes of this race. It's Chulapix leading from Gearza Grona. Lightspeed, final spot on the podium. Sharon Fly in P4, TBSS Girl in P5, Sarah Hawkey P6, FR Girl Sean P7, Yukino Suzuka P8. That is your top 8 right there. Fastest lap point is going to go to Chulapix. Gearza Grona is going to get the bonus point for the pole position, but the race win and the fastest lap very much out of contention here, especially considering that tyre choice. I just think in this situation, you never quite know, and it's when the weather starts to hit, any strategy that you have planned completely goes out the window. And K-Back has had a problem there. In the background there, of course, being lapped by the fellow McLaren of Sharon Fly. We'll have interviews very shortly after this race. 5 minutes left. Chulapix is leading the way, and I think to say, barring any major problems, I think the Mazda has won it. I think that Chulapix has won it, and this would be the first double win in top split in this series so far. Of course, something big has happened, and Chulapix had a massive problem. Oh boy. Oh boy. Heavy front damage. Engine damage as well. Oh no, commentator's curse. Have I just created an absolute mess here of this race? Possibly. Oh boy. It doesn't seem like Gearza has gained enough. Oh no, Gearza has gained significantly. I think the timing tower was just taking a moment to catch up. I think Chulapix has just cost herself this race. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Losing time in spades. And just lost it again. Gearza might have just stolen this win through just completely being in control. Chulapix. Oh no, and here's Gearza. Chulapix having massive problems. It seemed like a win, a confident win for Chulapix, but that has completely changed it once again. Gearza getting an absolute shot in the arm when it comes to just good luck. I thought earlier she had the best decision making, she had the best luck. Into the barrier of the pit lane as well. Oh no. It's all falling apart for the American driver. It all looked like a confident win. It all looked like a confident win. It looks like Lightspeed is going to take P2 as it stands. We've still got a couple of laps left to go, but this right here is championship changing once again. Gearza is now going to potentially walk away with the bonus point of the pole and maximum points in the race, excluding, of course, the fastest lap point. It's like Lightspeed having some problems there, but oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Of all the things that could have happened, of all the things that could have happened, the Tulipix, that is the worst case scenario. Lightspeed is just behind now. P2 is a possibility, but has got a penalty. I just don't think, looking at that time, I think that damage is too much. Though, in fairness, Lightspeed way too, and going, and gone. You know what? I should probably stop talking now, because whenever I say something, it just seems like all of the cars just end up in trouble. Oh boy. Oh, wow. Deep breaths here. Tulipix, of course, has that penalty to serve, but benefit of the situation here. That issue, that sizable issue for Lightspeed, has just saved probably a P2, though in fairness, that car is struggling. That car is struggling. It's the final lap of this race. At one point, I would have said Gears Grona looked out of this one. The strategy had gone wrong, tyre choice had gone wrong, decisions had gone wrong, and it was completely out of Gears Grona's control. But Tulipix, that issue very late on through Puon, has ended up leading to a race win that I didn't expect. Gears Grona wins. The first time a driver has won 2 races in the GT7 championship so far. Penalty is about to be served here for Tulipix, but I don't think it really matters here. Just keep the car on track here, Tulipix. Just keep the car on track. I think P2 you'll get P2, but what could have been for Tulipix? What could have been? What could have been? Motorsport is a cruel mistress sometimes, and not so as cruel as it could have been, as it definitely has been to Tulipix today. Finishes P2, but at one point it looked almost a certainty that P1 was going to happen, but making it through in the end, and Lightspeed will complete the podium in the Alpha. Maybe not the best situation for Lightspeed, but in fairness, that's a pretty good result considering Sharon Fly will get an absolutely fantastic P4 here, and will end up taking a massive step forward. And Sharon Fly will finish P4. TBS Girl, that will guarantee TBS Girl finishing P5. TBSS Girl finishing P5 in the Aston. She came into this race the championship leader. She is not the championship leader. Unofficially, she's not the championship leader anymore. TBSS Girl, worst case scenario here. Gears Grona wins, meaning that we are going to have a new championship leader heading in to the next race. And it is Gears Grona who leads the way from now. As you can see, Gears Grona is your winner. An incredible result with a massive heap of luck there. But to be lucky, to be in a position to be lucky, you have to ultimately keep fast. You have to keep the pace. And of course, Gears Grona wins the race. Tulipix will get the fastest lap point, but what could have been for the Mazda driver looked almost a certainty at one point until those issues through Puon will finish P2, and the podium will be finalised by Lightspeed in that in that in the Alfa Romeo. Sharon Fly would just miss out on the podium in their P4, with TBSS Girl coming 5th. Sarah Hawkey will be in P6, FR Girl Shaw in P7, Yukino Suzuka in P8. The last spots on the grid, Kay Buck would finish in P9 and Liberal Chaos will finish P10, both 2 laps down. We'll go into the B-roll, but we'll of course look at getting some interviews done very shortly for this one. Waiting to see how this all goes. Just keeping an eye on the interview room right here.
Okay.
So we'll go with the race winner, Gears of Corona. I mean, what else can you say other than the fact that I'm shocked that ended up going your way?
I am too. That race was a roller coaster of emotions, going back and forth from okay, I got this to okay, I don't got this to okay, I might have a chance. Okay, I don't have a chance, and then that mistake from Tulipix finally calmed that down.
Well, this
that was
is it.
Crazy.
I mean, to be honest with you, I sat there in the middle and I saw when Tulipix seemed to pull away with those dry tires after that sudden, burst of rain in the middle of that later on in that race. I sat there and went, you've had to come into the pits. I think you've just potentially been checkmated there. But I mean, what was your thoughts in that moment?
Yeah, my thoughts was that I kind of just gave up on first place because I knew I wouldn't have the pace on these tires, but if I pit, there was no way at all I would catch up, not even close. And if I did pit, I would have probably lost second place as well. I was a bit unsure of that, so I kind of just decided to finish out, hold my position, and yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, it was a fantastic result in the end. It means ultimately you've outside of the fastest lap, which went the way of Tulipix, you got the bonus point for the pole position. You got yourself your maximum points for your race win. That puts you in the lead of the championship going into the next round. I guess, how do you feel about that?
It's a good confidence boost, but there is still a lot of work to be done, and I got to make sure that I can defend this. And with how crazy these races have been, there's no telling what can happen in the next one.
Of course.
So I gotta stay on my toes.
Of course. Well, listen, is there anyone you want to say thank you to after this race win?
I want to thank Tulipix for practicing with me, and I definitely think they were the fastest car on track today. They did absolutely amazing. She was flying. I also want to thank my very lovely, adorable girlfriend for being my co-pilot today, and for hanging out with me in calm while I was racing. It meant the world to me, and I love you more than I ever have.
Well, congratulations on that, Gearza. Second win of the season. Hopefully we'll see you back once again in the next round.
Thank you so much. I'm excited.
We'll move on, of course, to the next interviewee. We're going to go with the third place finisher, Mariah Light. Mariah, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. Tulipix and I were just having a conversation there before I got pulled.
No, it's fine. Well, okay, that was surprisingly chaotic. I know you were talking at the very beginning, before the race, about how you expected the race to go with the Alpha, but I guess, how do you feel about the fact you managed to pull off a podium here?
Once again, it was a race full of unforced errors. Monza, I had about the worst race I could have possibly had, and then last week I had to make a hero drive back from somewhere deep in the field to just barely miss the podium. So this week I was pretty happy to rebound like I did. I came in with a strategy to basically run intermediates until the track looked dry enough that I could switch to softs. I could have switched a lap earlier, which I think Tulip did, which is how she ended up with the lead, but I just elected to play it safe, and it ended up playing out okay until it looked like I was going to be fourth again, and something happened to Jenny that she had to pit again. I don't know what exactly. But I was just stunned that my strategy ended up working out as well as I'd hoped. We got a surprise rain shower or two that really threw a wrench in the plans, but yeah, I actually ended up starting the race in reverse somehow, so I basically had to overcome everything that I possibly could have screwed up for myself this race, and it happened almost like I hoped, but it was it was definitely a absolute comedy on my end that I lucked into this week, I think.
Well, no, of course. I mean, given all of that, I mean, I think ultimately you give yourself too little credit. But on top of that, I guess, is there anyone you want to thank for your result this weekend?
Well, I'd like to thank my girlfriend for not wrecking me. That would be Kit Kat, who I passed somewhere in one of the rainstorms, I think. She managed to avoid me while I tried passing her sketchily in the one corner. And she's been my good luck charm these past couple weeks. Monza, she wasn't here for me. That didn't really go as well as I'd hoped that week. But you know, I'd like to thank her for her support and kind of being the good luck charm for me.
Of course. Well, congratulations on the podium finish, and we hope to see you at the next round.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I look forward to next week.
And of course, we'll move on to the final interview of the night with Tulipix.
Oh wait.
Hang on, we pulled the wrong person in. 2 seconds. There we go. Tulipix, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I was wondering if you were gonna interview Girza again.
No,
Yeah.
that wasn't intentional. So, I mean, what else can I say? So close, but so cruel.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but it's my own fault. I saw people were saying if it's a tech issue, but it wasn't. I just got a little complacent through Puhan, I guess, and I hit the wet line. And actually, the same thing happened in practice, so I should have known. But when you hit the wet line there, it's just absolute ice. So it was straight to the wall, basically.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you say? But I mean, ultimately, other than that, it seemed like the strategy call that you made ended up being an absolutely fantastic one. I guess quickly take us through that.
It did, yeah. So I did some practice, and I was thinking, I know Girza is so fast that the only way I was going to be able to beat her was by making less stops. So I started on the intermediate tires, the same as she did, and I think that worked out really well. Lost a little time in the first couple laps, but after that it worked well. And then when I saw the little rainstorms after, I thought, I'll lose some time, but it's not that much, and making a pit stop at Spa just takes so much time. So I stayed out, and like you said, it looked like it was going to work out. I lost like 30 seconds, but I was still ahead and pulling away because I was on the dries, and I'm pretty sure Girza was on the intermediates. But you just have to be really careful because of the wet lines. If you've done, the license test S10, you know how that works. And I was thinking I wasn't focusing, and when I got through Puhan, you just get a little bit wide and you get in the wet, and the car just won't come back. So.
Of course. Well, I mean, other than that, not the ideal scenario, but I mean, still keeping it together for a P2, I think is relatively positive. I guess the one positive to take from it. Is there anyone you want to thank for this for your result?
Same people as usual. I did practice with Girza again, and I think a couple other people were there. So thanks to that. Thank you for whoever's putting this on. Thank you to everyone that supports me. I think I did have a couple friends watching the stream. Not sure if they were in chat or not. And yeah, hoping to be back next week.
Of course. Well, fingers crossed we get to speak to you again.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you.
And of course, that will be the last of our interviews for tonight. But of course, with the results here today, the unofficial results as it stands, it's Girza Grona who now leads the championship over Jenny, TBSS girl. Of course, after those issues, cost TBSS Girl a potential podium. FR Girl Sean Mickelson currently in P3, relatively decent result there, keeping it semi-close. Tulipix continues to push the way up, but what could have been there for Tulipix had they got the race win? Sarah Hawkey in P5 and Mariah Light in P6, only 1 point between the two of them. Sharon Fly in P7 with 129, Purple Labras in P8 with 108, Asher Silver in P9 with 90, and Annalise Riot in P10. Going on to the next section here, we've got Christian Bach in P11 with Yukino Suzuka in P12, Kyle Oliveira in P13, Tanakitas in P14, Ellie Lamas in P15, Just Hun in P16, Girl Cole P17, Shara PT P18, Sandrita P19, and Zoe rounding up the top 20. So with that all said and done, that is your race for tonight. Of course, there is still more to come on Gran Turismo 7. Of course, broadcast direction being produced by Mike Yao of AK Esports, the race direction by Sophia Romwin. I'm Jamie Jessica Martin. We'll see you soon for the next round of the Screen to Speed Winter Cup.